G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Those of you familiar with my channel will possibly recall that back in March of this year I covered an article in the Australian newspaper, Rupert Murdoch's Fox News subsidised right-wing tow rag in Australia. Article, page 2, low fuel stocks a major security concern for vulnerable Australia. And as well as making a YouTube video, I also got on the typewriter. And after a fairly interesting interlude during the day, I composed a letter to my local Member of Parliament, Barnaby Joyce. And since I wrote the letter, 20th of March, which scored a reply 1 month later, basically explaining that a fellow called Josh Frydenberg was going to have to answer these questions. And eventually, in the fullness of the time, we came up with Josh Frydenberg's 24th of June reply. I suppose I could just read that straight to camera, but because it's an answer to a 2.5 page letter, and because Barnaby Joyce in the intervening time has been behaving as quite a significant level of a dickhead without even having the intestinal fortitude to show up at the local National Party meeting. So in the interest of fairness and openness and full disclosure, I'll just read the letter to camera before we tackle the Frydenberg reply. And, spoiler alert, when I sat down with the typewriter to compose this, it was mere hours after I had had a close encounter with Barnaby himself. Barnaby Joyce, member for New England. Dear Barnaby, I am writing regards a matter of bracket, literally close bracket, national security importance. But before getting to that, there's a personal matter I wish to mention. 2 hours ago, when you were promenading along the path in the park at the north end of East Avenue in Glen, it was indeed me that you recognised behind the Vote Green or Die global warming coal sticker on the bull bar of the White Forester with the sunfoil on the roof. To wit, Exhibit A. And when I saw you blushing as you turned the heavily pregnant Ms. Campion around to shepherd her back as fast as she could waddle towards your green and white Winnebago towing a little four-wheel drive, which was 200 metres away when I parked between you and it, I deliberately opened my pack of takeaway food, rolled down my window, read my newspaper and began eating my late lunch as I watched you retire from my presence as decorously as you could manage. I bring it up that you might better stumble that as a retired registered general nurse, I know better than to introduce a stressor, potential, real or imagined, into the space around a primipara in her final month of pregnancy. And in contradistinction to our last previous encounter, bracket when it mattered, close bracket, today there was no public interest reason to get in your face with my camera and secure footage of me asking you about anything to do with your private affairs. And because I was fairly confident that if I had attempted to approach you, you would have assumed I was trying to hassle you about your private affairs and duly burred up, and thus generated the heretofore mentioned not good stressful interlude for the above-mentioned primipara to have to endure. So therefore I pretended to have not noticed your presence in the park across the road from Wharton's garage, bracket, my grandfather's and father's business. I worked there for 6 months. And my son bought the town's auto electricians from the apprentice of the man who was, in 1958, my father's last ever business partner. So my son was trained by the last functional gasp of Wharton's garage. That Dad sold the place in 1973, the year I went to De La Salle College, Armidale, with your brothers. You never attended De La Salle College, Armidale, so today wasn't old school tie effect. And you weren't at Chevalier College, Bowral either. I want you to remember that today was because being a loudmouth extreme green activist does not make one a ruthless, reckless, savage antagonist who will take any and every opportunity to put the boot in, justifiably because it is a possible option. Right, on to matters of national importance. If you check with your receptionist, you will find that I telephoned your office at a little after midday today to request that you first get a copy of and read the lead article of page 2 of Friday 16th of March's 2018's Australian newspaper titled Low Fuel Stocks, a Major Security Concern for Vulnerable Australia by Simon Benson. 5 years ago, the previous IEA report to the OECD on Australia's ongoing failure to meet the OECD requirement for member nations to permanently maintain an emergency fuel reserve amounting to 90 days' worth of consumption at normal rates of usage was covered by ABC Radio National. So I've been aware for 5 years that there exists on mainland Oz enough bulk storage capacity at the port cities to hold a maximum of 29 days of average daily consumption, that the average holding is 21 days' worth, and that once or twice per month it drops to 14 days, so they said 5 years ago. This new IEA report doesn't speak of bulk storage capacity, it reports on the total amount of fuel on the continent, apparently counting everything in the tanks under the bowsers of every service station in Oz, as well as everything in every B-double and other tanker truck currently en route from bulk depot to the service stations. Because they massage 29 days into 43 to 48 days, apparently without building any new storage facilities. Importantly, the PJCOIS bipartisan report notes that there are currently no publicly funded government-owned storage facilities for any amount of refined transport fuel for any purpose, bracket, meaning the RFS, the SES, the ambulance, fire and rescue, state and federal police, ASIO, the Army, Navy and Air Force, all buy their fuel on a daily basis from the multinational petroleum distribution companies, close bracket, and the report also admitted that currently there are no legislations nor regulations to oblige, require or force the petroleum fuel distribution companies to maintain, store or hold any amount of fuel as an emergency or strategic reserve, and that Australia is the least prepared Western industrialised democracy on earth. Australia has no refineries, it has no merchant fuel tankers, and all its fuel arrives from Singapore by ship. As long as peace stays declared in the muddled East and the South China Sea, if the foreign ship owners feel like sending their vessels to carry fuel to Oz. Due to the ubiquitous just-in-time reorder system, in every town and suburb in Oz, there are 9 meals for every person, bracket, plus an allowance for tourists, close bracket, resident within the surrounding council boundaries. Everything is on 24-hour reorder, so the peanuts you buy today will be replaced by tomorrow, and everything on every shelf in every shop came into town on a truck which runs on diesel, which was refined in Singapore. I have a tiny little uncomputerised YouTube channel that runs on a prepaid mobile phone. 4,220 subscribers, 1.53 million channel views, kind of tiny. The channel name is Warbles on a Lot, and on Saturday, 17/3/2018, I made a little video by reading Simon Benson's article to camera, 5 minutes, and then unpacking it and explaining what it all means. The video is entitled, Australia 7 Weeks from Starvation and Collapse. I write to ask you to watch that little video. The unpacking only takes 10 minutes. I have a 15-minute upload limit. And then I reckon you should make it your mission to goad the government into urgently spending less on retro redesigned denuclearised French diesel-electric submarines and F-35, quote, little turds, unquote, and more on acquiring state and federal government-owned fuel storage bulk facilities. And if they've got half a brain, they'll retrofit all the fancy new Poli stations with an on-site emergency fuel reserve, or at least establish a government fuel reserve in every town or suburb. Otherwise, Australia becomes ungovernable in 3 days following a grid failure. And you can't run a coal-fired grid without refined transport fuel. The trains carrying coal and the bulldozers pushing it into the furnaces run on diesel, you see. And with no grid, the bowsers won't work because there's no power feeding the computer in the cash register which turns the pump on. And it's illegal to have the service station pre-wired to be able to plug in a backup generator, lest such a setup electrocute some unknowing line technician who might be trying to repair a broken cable that may have caused whatever blackout prompted the use of a backup generator. Fractal bureaucratic overconcern for, quote, safety on the one hand, and obsessive focus on the pursuit of, quote, efficiency, unquote, to be achieved by cost-cutting effected by replacing stock on hand with overnight delivery of whatever is required to carry on trading, on the other hand, between them have stuck us all in an incredibly stupid position, Barnaby, such that despite our differing views regarding environmental issues, I, as a voting citizen within your electorate, require you, as my elected Member of Parliament, to become sufficiently animated and passionate upon this topic as to manage to actually achieve something real and concrete which goes at least some way towards urgently remediating this deplorable status quo ante, which we have been bequeathed by our predecessors and we've grown to think of as being, quote, perfectly normal. It seems to me to be a reasonable request. Before I conclude, I feel an obligation to mention that while I fully recommend and request that you watch the video referred to on page 2, I also suggest that unless you are an appreciative connoisseur of anti-Barnaby Joyce videos of the excoriating kind, then please don't bother to watch any of my uploads which have your name in the titles. Justifiably, take it as read that in each and every one of them I figuratively pour a bucket of shite over yourself, because them's all part of the slings and arrows of environmental concerns and the broadacre agro cult of harvest everythingism within the potpourri of politics in Oz. Is that not so? I figure you're looking for a new start, rather than digging into old shit fights. So here you go, I'm a Green voter and I'm on board with you going balls to the wall on the issue of fixing Australia's acute on chronic fuel insecurity. Get cracking to ensure that the PJCOIS report is acted upon urgently and effectively. Off you go, good luck and have fun. I look forward to your reply. Yours faithfully, Warbles on a Lot. Thank you for your letter of 20th of March regarding my personal matters and energy supplies. I've noted your comments in relation to these matters and appreciate you contacting me. That's what he said. Followed by, with compliments, the Honourable Joss Frydenberg, Minister for Environment and Energy. Dear Mr. Joyce, Barnaby, thank you for your representation on behalf of your constituent, Mr. Chris Wharton of Glen, concerning Australia's liquid fuel reserves. The department is currently conducting an assessment of Australia's liquid fuel security to help deliver affordable and reliable energy and support Australia's national defence. This comprehensive assessment will look at how fuel is supplied and used in Australia, including our resilience to withstand disruptions arising both overseas and in Australia. The assessment will be completed by the end of 2018 and contribute to a broader consideration of energy security across liquid fuel, electricity and gas supplies in the National Energy Security Assessment by mid-2019. Australia's fuel supply has proven to be highly reliable even during significant global and local disruptions. This is because Australia sources fuel from over 20 countries and no single country provides more than 20% of our total fuel imports. If there is a problem in a specific region, Australia can rely more heavily on supplies from other places. Australia's average stocks of vehicle and jet fuel have remained relatively stable over the last 10 years, supporting around 3 weeks of consumption. 23 days was what I said. There are also around 45 oil tankers en route to Australia that collectively carry around 2 weeks of additional supply. In addition to our imported product, Australia currently has 4 oil refineries and produces crude oil domestically. As an International Energy Agency member and signatory to the International Energy Program Treaty, Australia is required to hold oil stocks equivalent to at least 90 days of the previous year's average daily net oil imports. Australia currently holds stocks equivalent to 49.6 days of net imports, by counting the 45 oil tankers. My department is working to implement Australia's compliance plan to address the current shortfall in oil stock holdings. Thank you for bringing Mr. Warbles on a lot's concerns to my attention. Yours sincerely, Whoa. That's what I make out of that hieroglyphic. Fwah. Josh Frydenberg. In other words, they've sidelined the matter to a subcommittee of a subcommittee because in the meantime the Liberal Party is having much more fun having leadership disputes and spills and tussles and squabbles. But anyway, that was the answer that Frydenberg gave via Barnaby Joyce, a man who is, according to his wife and kids, an absolute disgrace. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.